Thank you. Good morning. You can find Gbolahan on Twitter at Mr. G Quest. All right. So tweet at us with the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. You can also join us on YouTube where we're streaming live. Type in the search box Smooth 91 FM Lagos. And please hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. Also, leave a comment on WhatsApp. Our WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. Lagos, we start with a story from Punch newspaper this morning. Fayose seeks urgent passage of 9.9 billion naira supplementary budget. Fayose in Ekiti State House of Assembly have received his appropriation or revised appropriation bill for that sum. And when the document was cited, it said it was dated August 30, 2008. Now there are speculations around, that says or is suggesting that there are discrepancies in the timelines for this budget, both the supplementary and the previous one. Devoe, what are your thoughts on this?
Our man, I think this is his final dramatas to the country. Requested for an urgent approval of the supplementary budget. It's coming about 9.9 billion. Is the initial 2018 budget that was at 98 billion. This should bring it to 8 billion. Now, this should not in any way raise any eyeballs. Being the governor, he needs to move his state forward. But this is coming 32 days from this article to his hand to fire me. Secondly, this article, the purpose for this 9.9 billion was a bit sketchy. So expect the state thousand during the election period to be demanding for explicit reasons as to why 9.9 billion should be added at this last minute. I mean, let's not even bring up the rumors of the Lexus
things.
so many speculations, etc. I think that's secondary. What is important now is that the people are in charge of, or in the know actually, of what is going to happen with their own commonwealth.
Yeah. And I mean, I find it very interesting that, the part where he said if the governor wanted to pass the budget secretly, the document would have been made public. That was from Olanka, who was a media and publications communication director, who's really, paying respect to a special assistant to the governor, actually just giving him credence and making it seem as if, he has to do his job. I mean, you just give attention to the legislators, more or less.
Yeah, so Ekiti again.
But their stay after the expiration of their contract with the Zamfara state government. This seems like it's not the first time this is happening, but it just it gives us, most of the time we hear about this kind of experience from our brothers and friends who go to foreign countries, and then we see it happening here in Nigeria. You would assume that the borders are, as the borders are porous, it's almost easy for any foreigner to get into the country without proper checks. Now, what are the things that this highlights for you?
Well, what this actually highlights for me is the little errors and the little gaps that we have in our immigration system. You're talking about the porous borders. Yes, we do have a very porous border when we're talking about landed border. But at the same time, when we're looking at the Indians and the Koreans that have come in through, they must have obviously come in. They obviously came in through the original proper channels, yes, anyway, through the airport. But they only have fake documents also. Yeah. And this says a lot. As you said, it's not the first time that we've had this issue happening. But the question I'd like to address is, what have we learned from previous incidences that have occurred? What lessons have we preventing it going forward? I think we have a lot of these cases happening in this country, especially when we look at the situation that a lot of all these foreigners are coming to the country without proper documentation, are here to work, and they're usually being brought in by their employers.
Thank you.
What exactly is the government doing in terms of sanctioning those who are actually employing
because
people?
They're equally
illegally?
culpable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, it's no excuse to just, it's not back, but what other measures is the government putting in place? How are we ensuring that this does not reoccur going forward? There's a lot that needs to be done. Countries abroad that they put in place before you can actually get a job in those countries. There's such systems such as the NI, National Insurance Number, the Social Security Number that are usually put in place for people who want to work. What measures are we putting in place, and how are we ensuring that these documents are original documents, not for?
Because in this story, they mention of fake stamps and fake visas. There's no mention about or things like that. So it's very interesting. It's very good. I actually highlight those areas again, and something we should look at more closely. Thank you very much, Gbolahan, for that analysis. We go to this next story. You can also send you a message. 08094 Reaper Osinbajo wants financial flows treated like terrorism and drug trafficking. Devolves. We've seen repatriates stashed abroad by people who stole these monies over the years. And needless to say, the government spends a lot of money on legal fees trying to get these monies back into the country. I guess that's probably why the vice president is saying this. He said he made the call on Tuesday in Abuja while declaring a national conference on combating illicit financial flows and enhancing asset recovery for sustainable development. Take us through this story, Devoe.
Well, this was organized by the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption and in conjunction with the African Union, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then the Ministry of Justice and the Federal Inland Revenue Service. A lot of the agencies that address financial flows.
Yes.
Now, IFF, which is illicit financial flows, otherwise known as loot. Okay, he was saying that this needs to be addressed squarely because this was the reason why many African countries were in deficit, were lacking in terms of infrastructure development, quality education for the citizenry, among other social benefits like health and co. And this is true. And most times we talk about corruption, we talk about what they've made, and we forget the fact that for whatever has gone out, whatever has left us, we are the losers at the end of the day. That's why the government struggles to be able to deliver on many of its mandates. Now, he was talking also about how governments should take this serious. They should first of all look at international collaboration. So she was asking, speaking on behalf of African countries,
Yes.
that the international society where most of this money moves to should work with us, collaborate with us to be able to get some of this back, even though it costs a lot in terms of legal fees. Now, the question is, he's speaking as the vice president. A lot of this money filtered away through political offices.
Yes.
So the question is there political will or is it just sound bites at the end of the day? Have they been able to heal themselves? Has the physician been able to look at itself and say, okay, I'm aware that these are the loopholes? If you remember, I think was it the last administration when money was being filtered at the, what do you call that account? The excess crude account, which till date has not been given some legal legislation so as to know how it's meant to be shared. Those are leakage points and loopholes which need to be addressed. This is how our Commonwealth is being drained. One. Secondly, if you remember, yes, in the Nigeria's case, I think in Switzerland, they did state how 321 million, which is the Abacha loot, was returned through a lot of collaboration and synergy with the law enforcement agencies there. I know the EFCC works with Interpol. They've done that severally to try and track many of the people and the funds. Thirdly, sometimes the countries themselves do take actions on their own. Like France in 2017, one of their courts prosecuted the then son of the president who was convicted for looting millions of euros. And I think they seized lots of his private property, capped his accounts, etc. and co.
Yeah.
This is what we need to happen to ensure that there is a strong indicator to those who would want to loot funds away, that there's no resting place for those funds.
And even for those countries who are not willing to cooperate in getting these funds back into the country as well.
Well, you can only plead with them. At the end of the day, they have their own laws, but it's for us to set the tone. Most of them respond to the legal framework and integrity of the government that is speaking. So if they know that you are setting a precedent of no what's the word? of not taking your country's commonwealth for granted, then they can work in tandem with you.
Thank you very much.
I mean,
Gbolahan.
I just wanted to add to what Devoe has actually mentioned about the magnitude of the issues that we have. It's actually estimated that about $50 billion annually is actually moved out of the continent, Africa, illegally. And 70% of those funds for the West African region actually comes from Nigeria.
Wow.
And this is actually by Thabo and Becky.
Interesting. That's a large chunk.
We don't carry last, even in IFF.
Wow. Thanks for that.
Lagos, let's move on to this next story.
And just before we do, just to let you know that we are aware that the app is down at the moment, but don't worry, we are working on that. In the meantime, you can watch us live on YouTube, and of course, you can continue to send in your messages on the different platforms.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate your concern, your connection with us as well, and your contributions. From Punch newspaper, I'll have this next story that talks about the people who have been illegally detained by the DSS. So Falana, a human rights lawyer, Mr. Femi Falana, has asked on Tuesday. He's written another letter to the Acting Director General of the Department of State Services, also known as State Security Service, Matthew Sayefa, demanding the names of 294 Nigerian citizens allegedly held in the agency's custody illegally. And he's also, he commended the director for acceding to his letter, or really responding to his letter that he sent in August first, and then still requesting for the remaining people illegally detained by the DSS to be released. What are your thoughts, Gbolahan?
Well, first of all, I'd like to give commendation to Mr. SAN Femi Falana anyway for this continuous human rights fight that we've been having anyway. We need more of this anyway. And this actually ties into the conversation that we were having yesterday, where it was said that 70% of those in prison or in captivity are actually those that are still awaiting trial.
Yes.
We're having a follow-on from this as well to, under the DSS custody. It's actually alleged that 294 citizens are illegally held captive. And it's in violation of their human rights, anyway. When we talk about the issues, no one should actually be held captive for more than 48 hours without any backing from the law court. Unfortunately, what we have here is a situation where, the DSS has just taken the laws onto their hands and they've held people captive for so long. And, when we look at it as well, Falana is actually written August 20th, just as you mentioned, and some people were actually released. And it was later on that they found out that 294 people are still being held in detention as well. So it's when you look at it.
Here's a question: do you think that this is perhaps a leftover sentiment that we see our security agents having because of our history of military rule? Because we know that this is now a pattern that seems to be present across the security agencies. The DSS, which ought to largely be secret, let's be front and central topic we discuss quite often, but this habit that our security agencies seem to have of holding people regardless of what their rights may be, do you see that ending anytime soon?
Well, it's a leftover, just as you said, it's a leftover of the military rule and what we have, our mentality anyway, towards governance. When we're looking at our security apparatus, the police, the DSS, we're looking at institutions that have been, they've been physically, I would say they've the proper structures that have been put in place over the years. And it's high time that we start to look at reforming institutions so that they are actually operating at standards. It's a spillover from what we've had. But looking at when it will come to an end, obviously a lot needs to be done by the government to ensure that this is actually we put an end to this.
Yeah.
Let's hope they don't continue to operate outside the ambit of the law. We have quite a few messages coming through. I'll go over to this one from Tunde Okufi, because he says, I can bet my last dime that the visa documents were provided by government officials offering services to expedite and facilitate, much in the same way that some vehicle licenses or registration fake, he says. While James from Marine Beach says, or rather, let's see, we've got this one in from ZZ Classic, actually, who says, let me play the devil's advocate like Folu. Wow, wonderful news. Please see me here. From you, rice seizures. Now, would that be, but there were illicit bags coming through there, or perhaps they just managed to find their way through. Your thoughts?
Well, the characterization here is that, first of all, despite the government, the is still topping the list. And this article, in a way, just brings out reasons why. Now, it does say that other ports, apart from seaports, have been the corridors of entry for the smuggled rice. So, at the Apapa port, that's the seaport, they were not seizures were not recorded, but through the land borders and the various zones, etc., this was coming through. Secondly, apart from rice, number 2 on the list was poultry. That's chicken, and as it was being seized, it was being burnt and
Destroyed,
confiscated.
we're
Yes.
told.
Now, what are the reasons that accrued to this? Some of the customs official had said that rice is a steady, it has a steady demand.
It's a sure banger, as they
yes,
say.
it's a sure banker. It's highly profitable for these marketers who go through every means to have it brought into the country. Apart from that, and this is where we need to learn a bit of economics, they said that the rice, that's the smuggled rice, is more available in the country than even the local rice production. So that the local rice production is not enough to meet our needs, and that's clear. And I think at this point, I don't have my exact figures in terms of Nigeria's consumption, in terms of the millions of tons of rice that we eat, but local production currently is meeting up. I think the last time the Agric minister, I think we're doing about almost half, if I'm correct. We're coming up from 30%. It's up at 50% at this point in time. It's growing, yes, but it still hasn't outweighed the imported rice, especially the ones that come in smuggled. Now, what are the economic issues here? It's cheaper, first of all. It's more accessible, more available in the market, so it has better distribution. These are the issues that the local production needs to get into. Now, you see, the local production, local produced rice, is still on a growth curve, despite its advantages. Let me say something for locally produced rice. One, locally produced rice is tastier, although that's relative.
No, it does taste better.
Yes. Secondly,
Still
it's
subjective.
yes,
But carry on.
it's healthier because it's less polished. Most times we used to think that the finer the rice, the better it is. No, the finer the rice, you're actually eating chaff. So we need to appreciate what we grow here and patronize it because it's actually good for our health.
Shout out to Ofada Rice.
Yes, and shout out to all those rice farmers who have bit the bullet to get this far because it hasn't been an easy journey. But I think the government needs to look at more incentives in terms of giving land and also loans for most of these rice farmers to be able to get their rice out there. I mean, there's kudos to the Ambode government, you know, and how they did a collabo with Kebbi State and brought out the most world famous lake rice, which I'd even get a bite of because it was such on high demand.
I did.
Yeah, you did.
It
You
was
see
lovely.
now, something good can come from Lagos, you know? So
Okay.
we're hoping that more state governments, you know, collaborate in the same way to ensure that at the end of the day, we can bring down the numbers of smuggled rice into the country.
Thank you very much. If people are interested, the federal government is targeting at producing 8 million tons of rice locally in the country by the end of this wet season. So let's see how that goes. But talking about state collaboration, Paris Club Refund to states, the federal government has listed conditions for the final disbursement of the 2.689 billion US dollars. We've taken this particular story from the Daily Times. You see it with different headlines and other papers. So I go to you, Gbolahan. What are your thoughts on this? I'm basically saying that, listen, salary arrears must be paid as a priority, amongst other things.
Well, I think isn't it a shame that we're getting this large amount of money coming back into our country, and what we're actually targeting is payment of salaries. We're looking at $2.68 billion, which is a significant chunk of our budget if we look at it, because our budget is currently will be about between 20 and 30 billion dollars, if not even less than or so. So when we're looking at 2.68 billion dollars that is coming back from the looted funds, as part of the Paris Club funds,
Yes, Paris
refund
Club,
actually.
yeah.
It's and we're using it as payment of salaries. When we look at the conditions that were stated here, most of the conditions there, none of it is actually talking about capital expenditure. We're not talking about infrastructure development. All we're just talking about the conditions that I can see that was actually stated here is salary to ensure that salaries and staff related arrears are cleared. Also ensure that the repayment of the budget support loans that was granted in 2016 is also paid. The other condition that was also tied to this as well too is ensuring that the amount that was due for the Presidential Fertilizer Initiative is also cleared and refunded as well too. So a lot of all this money that we're talking about that is actually being refunded to the state is actually money that the states are actually owing the federal government at the end of the day. So it's
or owing their workers, because really I think the issue here is that they have had all these outstanding salary issues, and they have been receiving payment from the federal government. Let's not forget that earlier this year we saw FAC allocations go out, and we see them go out every month. And so it is a problem that the states, whenever they receive these monies, tend to use them for other things, amongst which they will say, yes, they are for capital projects. But again, what is the purpose of a capital project if you cannot maintain it, if you cannot pay the people that are supposed to be working on certain things? Is it not better to make sure that you sort out your pre-existing financial obligations?
Well, it's important to sort out the pre-existing financial obligation as long as that pre-existing financial obligation will not continue to be a pre-existing financial obligation, because the issue that we keep on having is the problem of payment of salaries, and salary is a reoccurring thing. We're going to continuously continue to pay salaries, and if you don't have the money to pay the salaries, it brings back to the topic.
Is it that they don't have the money, or that they're not using their money, they're not managing the funds appropriately?
Well,
because that's what the federal government is pointing at.
They're not managing the funds properly. But remember as well too that this is not the first time that we've actually released this. Conditions that were tied to releasing the next tranche of funds. How have we done in terms of monitoring those conditions? I don't think and this monitoring was meant to be done by the Ministry of Finance.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that, Gbolahan. How well do we do in checking and monitoring that people do meet up with their agreements? Speaking of agreements, up next, Lagos on edge as Tinubu rallies forces against Ambode. That's the headline that Vanguard is taking. And Devoe, we're going to go to you for your take on this one. Rather interesting political higi-haga. I think that's the way we should put this one this morning. We had seen reports from last night filtering into this morning about major moves against the governor of Lagos State. The story that we read today implies that with the 57 different local governments sort of approving another candidate to run, or at least endorsing his form, that this could even spell impeachment for our current governor at the moment. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's just a heavyweight championship going on. And mind you, before we go into the story, this is the happenings of one party. So people should still remember there are other parties, even though this one looks so colorful.
Thank you.
Let's start with this match. First of all, our good working governor, his position is really being sought after come this new 2019 election. First of all, he went to pick up his ticket in Abuja and came back to Lagos to declare in Alausa instead of the party headquarters that was in Acme Road in Ogba. That was the first position that sent some signals. Why is this happening? He then went ahead, and this was also followed by another contender in the market who came in the name of Jide Sonwolu, who was presented by a strong caucus, that's the Mandate Caucus, who normally speaks on behalf of the national leader. Some wonder whether Baba Sokwede in that instance, but we are still yet to understand. While that was still going on, if that was not enough, another Bagao, to think that he could have joined another party, PDP presents its own beautiful bride, which was rumored in the presence of the billionaire businessman or Ted Dollar.
He's on holiday in Paris.
Yes, and he has said that he's not going to compete against him, but we're yet to see whether that's going to happen. Another Bagao, Baba has not Sokwede, so people are still wondering what is he going to say, but his body language seems to be a blessing towards the Shonwalu camp.
And
because
by Baba, you mean Ashiwaju Bola Tinubu?
Yes. Now, the 57 LCDA chairman also had a secret closed-door meeting and came out, Bagan, and made an open endorsement of the Jide Sonwolu, followed by rumors in the House that the plot that was instigated by the governor to remove the speaker was foiled. So there are a lot of forces against him. I think if he was popular, this is the time to, for the popularity to work in his favor. But let's keep our eyes open. and our fingers crossed.
Drama.
All right, Gbolahan.
Well, can I just quickly add that we actually had similar incidents happen during was the previous governor's tenure as well. For running for second term anyway. It was against the wishes of
But then,
Asiwaju.
whether Baba Sokwe, the people Sokwe also. And
what do you think the people's leaning is at the moment?
this time,
Current
the
governor.
people are not Sokweing anymore.
Because
So
people should speak.
power belongs to the people.
People should pay
Absolutely.
attention to the fact there are other candidates available from other parties, so should actually just do our due diligence and look out for other candidates.
On that note, we're done with Freshly Pressed for this morning. A big thank you to everyone that has sent in messages. Thank you for the conversation this morning, and we're sorry we can't get through to all your messages as well. But do keep listening because, of course, in the final hour of Smooth Breakfast between 9 and 10, we will be dealing with one of these topics in more detail.
Coming up next, we'll talk about sports at 8:15 inside of the locker room. Good morning.
Oh, time did fly today. That was so fast. That was quick.
Spent too long on the earlier stories. Keep doing this.